else.
I don't know if that's possible just yet. That's an interesting concept. I don't think they could
It's like the
do
quantum
just.
eraser state. It's the
Yeah, I don't
quantum
think they're there
eraser.
yet. I know
Yeah.
what you mean, but I don't think they could be, but I don't think they're there yet.
Okay.
They definitely know how to play with time.
No, there's
They
something
proved it.
called a beam splitter, and it could split into two different routes. And then, that one, whatever detector detects one, it collapses the other.
Okay,
But
so
still, it could be
time
measured.
splits into two routes when you're playing with it. But time is an energy, and there's levels of energy within that time. It's not just times this energy. No, time has levels of energy within the flow of time itself. So when you use or start playing with time, it splits. So there's a positive and a negative, so to speak, right? You can't go back in time, but like you had said, you can see back in time, but you have to have that connection. And it has to be from that point source where it's split so that you can look back or look forward or look at that present point. But you can't just look into somebody's timeline and look backwards. There's a whole thing involved with it. And there's the amount of energy you have to use to connect to that time, that resonance, and that energy in that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I've
Because
been playing with this stuff for a few years, so I know where to go with it. Sorry.
like the whole idea is to prove it wrong that you could have two different fields, one that detects one timestamp
Mm-hmm.
and the one that they thought was erased. You know, on like it's to do the reconciling of
I see
whatever.
what you mean, but you would have to be able to see all time, everywhere, at all time in that very split second, and that's. I
AKA
don't think
God.
there's a computer possible to do that other than
God.
God himself.
Yeah, God,
You know?
or supposed God technologies that Sal was trying to claim.
Oh, come on. Sal's a hack. God technologies. You can fucking. Come on. Super Force? What is he, Flash Gordon? Come on! You could kill God. I don't think so, buddy. Or even dethrone God. I don't think so. Must be
Sounds
because
like
he's.
a pretty.
Yeah.
What's that?
Sounds like a pretty satanic sort of philosophy,
Hey,
dethroning
man, if you
God
believe
thing.
that the fallen.
Antichrist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you believe that the fallen angels are what created you, that says it all right there.
It's like
Go
it's like
ahead, have fun, good luck, enjoy your
it's
green men.
it's like the Higgs boson. They call it the God particle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I stay out of the
Exactly.
whole. I try and stay out of the physics definitions of all what CERN has done, because it's. You know what? It's just another way of justifying some other guy's job for the next 15 years and another college group of people on writing papers on a whole bunch of bullshit that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, what is a quark, a zork, a torque, whatever that they've got, a boson, a bison, all those things? What does it have to do with what we do today? Is it going to turn on my lights? Is it going to create gold out of thin air? None of that shit matters if you can't apply it in an everyday sense. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, they use it
Very
for
opinionated tonight.
Gerald.
Sorry.
They use it for a controlled digital system. Like what your
Just like they
computers are
use,
made out of, what your TVs are made out of, what your cell phones are made of, like anything.
just
And so, like, that's they create like systems with this, like
CERN.
diagrams for.
No, it's engineers and it's inventors that create systems that work like this. CERN
Yeah,
is just a big, I don't know, circle jerk of physicists that like to create papers out of thin air.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my opinion, but
No,
move
but
on,
it's
right? I'm
true.
a
It's true.
nobody.
I mean, I
It
would
don't
like to
matter.
believe. I would like to believe this that
They
there.
also seem to be opening portals, though, from what's
Well,
documented.
that's
Okay,
Yeah.
but
debatable. It's
wouldn't you think?
possible, but
This
debatable.
Wouldn't you guys think it would be cool to, really filter out all of the fluff in humanity and have a core seeding atomic structure of rebuilding humanity, and like knowing, with a certain thing, whether we're made out of stardust, that somehow on the deepest of subatomic levels, that humanity is going to thrive somewhere else.
The
You
only
know,
way you could do that is to have absolute truth, and people will not accept the truth. They won't. Because
Yeah,
if you
people.
accept the truth, you have to accept the fact that you lied sometime in your life, maybe stole sometime in your life, maybe you fucked over a best friend sometime in your life. To have the absolute truth, to know what you're talking about, you got to have the truth about everything.
all right,
So
I
people
could
don't
give you a
want to
better.
look at
I
themselves in
could
that
give you
manner.
a
So we,
better one. All the above is true, but that doesn't, negate the fact that we're built on our atomic level structure, to survive. And if we, on that atomic level structure of all of humanity, if we preserve, that would help us, evolve on other planet systems, other cosmos, other,
well,
planetary
what
systems.
what if I was to say to you that it's written and that it's well known, but we're all lied to so much it's insane. We're actually made of light.
Yeah.
And if
People.
we were to evolve into light, you could travel to far stars and galaxies and you wouldn't need a ship. You would
Yeah,
just go.
and the speed of light is not a limit by far. It's an amount of energy that the electron has in the positron. when
Well,
when they annihilate, they convert into the energy is converted into kinetic energy, but it's not a limit. It's just you're not gonna create. You're not gonna travel in the past if you go faster than light. That's total
Okay.
bullshit.
On an
you
atomic
can pause
structure,
time, you
our
can't go
our, our
backward.
brain emits biophotons. Our eyes emit biophotons. They emit a sequence. And so even when we look at a planetary system that's really far and we focus on it, it's emitting biophotons of energy towards that. They travel
Okay.
faster than light. And our energy already has reached otherwhere on the, the biophoton level. We were already there, but I'm saying on our real level, like it would be nice if we, like really do a project like that goes global of, and we
Do you
call
want
it
to
like
know
global
you want to know why
recognition.
I think that project will never come to fruition? Because it's based on E equals MC squared. And
No,
E
plus
equals MC squared is
power
like
of
a
three.
prison. It's like a prison. It stops you from doing anything. You can never find more energy out than, oh, don't do that. You can't do that. E equals MC squared says no. But E equals MC squared was written as a linear expression of something in the vacuum, not everyday life
Yeah,
of something that's nonlinear.
the,
So
the,
every time I hear a physicist say E equals MC squared, I think he's a fucking idiot because either he's a liar or he doesn't know enough to know that he doesn't know enough. So
yeah,
when you and I discuss about photons and how the energy is transmuted or moved around the world or the universe, we're basing it in our minds already on E equals MC squared. And because that's a linear algebraic equation and not reality, we automatically go to the things that we're taught, but they're not exactly truth. Do you know what I mean by that? And hey, I'm just one guy. I could be wrong. Of course, everything I'm going to show in the next month will prove I'm not, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so I'm right now I'm just a big mouth talking shit, right? So we'll see.
yeah. By the way, last time I was talking about last week I was talking about the ambient energy at the macro scale and the ambient energy at the nano scale,
Yep.
and I had trouble to understand why it was different. And but looking at this video here, it makes a lot of sense because the Casimir, you'll see that the wavelength are ineffective. The way the long wavelengths are not effective for the Casimir, but the shorter wavelength are very very effective for the Casimir
The
effect.
idea is that when two uncharged conductive plates are placed in a vacuum, a few nanometers apart, an attractive force arises. In a simplified classical sense, there is no external field present except for gravity, which should be extremely small in this case, so there should be no force measured. In a quantum vacuum, electromagnetic fluctuations appear and disappear as intermittent electromagnetic modes that span an infinite range of wavelengths in free space.
How do you affect
In
it?
between the two plates, the larger wavelengths do not fit. The difference between the waves that can exist on the outside compared to those on the inside creates an effective net force that pushes them inward.
So you can see that the wavelength, the different wavelength are don't some are the longer ones are not effective for the Casimir effect, and the shorter ones are effective. So that explains why the energy density at the nanoscale is not affected by a longer wavelength. You know what I mean? So
Yes, I do.
so
Yes,
yeah,
I do. I was going to explain something differently with a Casimir effect, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
so yeah, that's because I wanted to understand why the energy then or the energy potential was different at the
Has
macro
to do with
scale and the
speed.
nano scale.
Has to
Exactly.
do with
Yeah.
speed. Think
Yeah.
about that. You take a ping pong ball, you stick it between two walls, right? If it can bounce infinitely between the two walls, it's going at a certain frequency. Push the walls together. Now it's going to bounce faster. Push them even together, quicker, right? Real
Yeah.
fast. You're going so fast you can't even see it. That's why certain wavelengths can't be within that, and certain ones can. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
That's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a little answer that I was seeking of last week, but yeah, thanks, man.
We're going to change the world, boys! Woo!
Like, it's
I'm
like
telling you, we're
field
gonna have a lot of fun
frequencies,
this summer.
right?
Doctor.
Field frequencies. Like this is what determines what field, a frequency spectral line is on. And it's like
How much
colors.
energy is within that area of
Yeah.
your environment? That's what creates the field itself. Is the energy compacting in a compressive form just within the bubble that you're releasing? So,
Or reflecting.
yeah, reflecting, refracting,
Yeah.
they're kind of intertwined, right?
Yeah.
It's like think about it like an echo, right? You create the bubble, smack the echo, and watch everything reverberate. Kind of like what I said before, just tickle it. Tickle it and watch it laugh. All right?
Hey, Mike,
The
Mike,
G factor.
hold on, stop. Who is this Stinky N? Who is this annoying dude in the chat, dude? He's like driving me nuts. Can somebody please tell him he can't come on or something?
Stinky Pinky?
Inky Winky.
Send me a link. Send me a link. Send me a link, dude. Go suck your mama's tit, dude. Leave us alone. I mean, for God's sakes, man.
That's a different name.
That's Inky Winky. I think.
Dude, it's annoying.
Nathan, like, what sort of name is that? No souls.
That's his
allowed.
name.
See, if
How do
we
you-
don't know you, you could be one of those guys that comes on and does some weird shit with this video and
Yeah.
right in the drum here. Yeah, we can't. It's
We're
bad enough
talking
they
about
let a crazy guy like me on.
Yeah, we're talking about field compression, and this a-hole's over here like, let me on, let me on, let me on. Dude, oh my God. Yeah, go back to mommy.
Oh my God.
No.
Got a few new faces here.
So would it be a capacitor or a converter or what, like, would kind of work in the same sense of field compression.
You're just compressing the you're compressing the frequency so that only certain ones can get in
Energy.
there to multiply the field. You're creating a laser. If you do it too hard, you're creating a laser.
You're
But it's also
compressing the energy.
but it's also energy, right?
That's all it is. It just produces light because it's not allowed to get out. And then once it does, it shoots a beam of light across the room.
Yeah, it's exactly. The more it's compressed, it just becomes, like you said, a coherent beam of light.
This.
But can this light's energy be harnessed?
Well, somebody
Yes.
used a laser to spin something and make it fly up. I saw that.
Oh,
So
you should see what I'm doing with lasers. Oh, man, lasers are. If you use like different nanometer lasers and cross them in an electromagnetic field that's spinning, you get some very, very interesting results. Did you know that particulate matter falls out of lasers when you're talking through it? You create a ball, like it's kind of like ball lightning, but it's not. It's a ball of light with two interacting lasers in an electromagnetic field, and you start speaking through that little laser ball through the mods of the lasers itself. Particulate matter starts to fall out. I don't know if it's what's in the air that's falling out because of the high voltage, or if it's something that the lasers
is it combining it?
Yeah,
There's dust particles in there combining.
So it's
two different
creating
colors
dust.
at different pulse rates.
So it
And I'm
creates
creating a
dust.
ball, and I'm talking through that ball by modulating them. What was that, Lulu? Sorry.
Creating dust or granules of matter.
Yeah, like dust. Because at the underneath on my countertop, when I'm done, and I go and wipe my hand, I got all this powder all over my hands. Hopefully, it's not poisonous. Because hey, I'm done for.
It's monoatomic. It's a question of what type.
What's
What type
that?
of white powder he's talking about? He's
Yeah,
wondering what
it's
type
not
of white powder.
monoatomic.
I don't know if it was quite white. It kind of looked yellowish. So
Oh, you're getting some
what it
sulfuric.
was.
Or
Maybe
pollen. Or
in the
pollen.
next experiment, I'll collect it. I'll put it in a little vial.
Maybe it's gold.
Nah, I don't think so. It wasn't shiny like gold. It wasn't. I've seen gold be
Doesn't
imparted
shine.
onto glass and stuff. Didn't look like that.
Hmm.
But who knows? I mean, I got to get it tested to know for sure, right? But interesting stuff, I'm telling you.
Gold dust.
Yeah,
Gold
laser
dust.
dust.
What a way
Quantum
to
dust.
sell like dusters.
Ooh.
What was that, Lulu?
Shattered dreams.
I said what a way to sell dusters, to cause dust in the air so people buy more dusters.
There you go. There you go.
Swear to God.
Yeah. Who knows what it was? Could have been dust from the air, and it just ended up falling out more from the two lasers interacting and it being modulated. I don't know. I'll collect it next time, and we'll see.
You
Put it on video
say
and show it.
that, I think of the Wi-Fi routers in the house. Like, could their triangulation create that kind of wave frequency where it creates dust? Like,
I don't know, but they can definitely 3D model your house from Wi-Fi.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Definitely.
So it's fun to put Coca-Cola cans to in different places to offset their
Mess around with them.
like frequency to disrupt it. Just different objects.
I got lots of cats. They're always walking around. I'm sure that messes with it. So what's new with everybody? I just popped in to be an arse, but my video didn't work right, so it sucks. Right? That would have been so perfect the way it came out too, man. I might put it on my channel still.
Yeah.
I like Sal. Sal's fun.
Oh yeah. Do you guys remember the experiment I did? You reminded me about the experiment I did with the laser. It's actually pushing dust. I did film it. I put it on my YouTube channel, but laser is can push like smoke. Smoke in a jar.
Oh yeah.
It just propels. It kind of pushes, so it has a force. You can detect a force there, and so it moves air particles, and that's remember Ben the little experiment with the rotating rotating fins that you expose to light
Yeah,
in not absolute vacuum, but close to absolute vacuum. The
that
fins are
could have
gonna
been part.
start rotating.
That could have been
Well,
part of the mechanism that where I seen the dust. It was moving it around. Maybe I don't know. That's making me think.
yeah, but I'll try to find my video. I'll show it to you.
Excellent.
There is the possibility that it's photonically precipitated, but more than likely it's electrostatic precipitation of larger fine particles that are already floating around in the air. Primarily, it's dead skin and other
Yeah,
pieces of
that's
material. And what it'll do
because
is
it was
the
yellow. That's
electrostatic
what I was thinking.
right, the
It was
electrostatic
something that was
fields
already.
will take the dipole moment of that material, even if it's not necessarily charged, and because the electromagnetic energy is filling that space, the physical matter that blocks the electromagnetic energy or absorbs part of it, even if it absorbs a tiny little bit, will steal some of its momentum and be pushed by it. So what ends up happening is all the pieces of fine particle dust are pushed together into larger clumps, where their surface area in total decreases because the inside volume of air that they're exposed to becomes less due to them becoming solid. So as they become larger, they don't have that same what we call that. Well, they're basically too heavy, too dense at that point to now stay lofted in the air by tiny little air currents. So they'll fall out or precipitate out. If you look up
Where's
electrostatic
the fun
precipitators, it's
in
a really
that?
commonly known thing. What's that?
I said, where's the fun in that?
Well, it's actually a lot of fun because if you
I'm
create.
kidding, Jeremiah. I'm kidding, brother.
Oh, sorry, I can't tell.
It's all good, man. It's all good.
No,
I'm
No,
actually,
it's
playing.
just
you
that
could use a similar system though on a very large scale to just start dropping massive amounts of pollution out of the air, say in a city that's all smogged up, for example. The problem with electrostatic precipitators is that they require a particularly high operating voltage in a very, very large area of the machine itself, because an electrostatic precipitator can only precipitate the air that moves between the ionization mesh and the collection panel where the stuff is precipitated onto. So you have to have a machine as big as the volume of air flowing through it that you want to clean. But with your machine, what you're doing is inducing electric charges that are already in the air into action at a distance. And the reason why that's different is just imagine on the top of tall buildings in the middle of a highly populated city filled with smog, you have these giant coils whose sole purpose is to generate node points or pinch points of electromagnetic interaction or interference within the atmosphere above and around these coils. And so all the dust and crap that's floating around in the air basically is just clumped together into larger granules until they become large enough to actually fall out of suspension and drop to the ground, therefore clearing the air. And the great thing is these frequencies that they'll operate at are fairly low by comparison to other signals like Wi-Fi or cellular
Oh
communications.
yeah.
And so you turn these machines on basically in the morning and, they can run off solar panels that are also on the top of the roof, because the great part is they can actually operate well next to other equipment and not necessarily disrupt them if the wavelengths are tuned. And the whole city would be smog free within 30 minutes of these things running, provided that you have enough of them on the tallest buildings.
Well,
Yeah, we'd have some
That's
bit of
possible.
grain for sure.
everything you said exists. So what are the granules made out of?
Oh, they're made out of
Whatever.
unburned fuels and carbon
Yeah.
and dirt that's kicked up and just dust and sand and crap
Anything
from the
that
air.
has energy
And lots of cow
capacitance
parts,
is
right? Don't forget the cow parts.
anything
Basically,
that has capacitance value.
well, basically the
Cow
dust is just
parts.
made of any physical matter, any stuff that's actual matter that has a nucleus made of protons and neutrons. All that stuff, high mass, high density particles, are going to compose your dust. So, and that's just all the stuff that's on Earth already. The thing is, the stuff generally falls to the ground, but when the particles get small enough, even things that are, even heavy elements, heavy metals that you would expect just drop like a brick, like titanium or lead or something. If those particles get
Monatomic
small
stuff.
enough, right,
Monatomic.
then they're actually small enough to be bumped around by Brownian motion in the air or by small breezes or air currents. And so even the heaviest of elements, including radioactive dust, can be whipped up and strewn around the entire planet. And that's one of the dangers of fallout, right? Because you have these particles that become so fine, they're basically single atoms of these radioactive materials, and they can stay in the atmosphere for a really long time, follow the jet stream, and go around the entire planet, dropping on places that have never been exposed to it. So that's one of the dangers of using this technology when us humans don't seem to be responsible enough to do basic things like maintain our roads or bridges, and we're playing around with this kind of stuff.
That sounds bad.
Yeah, it's
That's
a
the
pretty bad
ego,
place to
though,
be in.
Jeremiah. That's the ego. That's everybody thinking they want the fucking holy grail, but nobody wants to go to hell to get there.
Well,
The only
exactly.
thing that makes me think of why they do this is to use it as a material for signal to like.
Well, it's
And
actually something much more simple and instinctive, Lulu. And I think that Alan Watts said it best when he was giving one of his philosophical speeches to his students. He was, talking about what motivates man to do the crazy things that it does. And he's using scientists as a reference in this particular one. And he says, today's scientists, they have this idea. If it can be done, it must be done. And they think very little of the implications or consequences of what will actually happen. They're more concerned with whether or not they
Question.
can do it.
In regards to that, does that mean the dire wolf has put us into a dire situation and we've actually resurrected the hellhounds and we're all screwed?
If I knew what dire wolf was, I'd be able to answer that question.
The dire wolf is the wolves that were extinct 10,000 years ago that we just brought back to life through gene editing because, just because it can be done means it should be done. And the next step after that is the mammoths, and after that, the dinosaurs.
Yeah, the dinosaurs.
the thing
Yeah.
is, it can get as big as like maybe a small elephant.
Well, I think if we bring something like the dire wolf back, it's not in a particular danger, and it's certainly not playing God because we didn't design it. All we did
No,
was put it back together. It was
it's
broken
a.
pieces. So,
It will
and
become one of the biggest predators on planet Earth.
well, not really, because it would have to be capable of having that kind of proliferation and breeding.
Yeah, they
And
already made like 2 or 3 of them.
okay, so let's face it, Lulu. What animal is too large, too aggressive, too smart, or too fast for us humans to completely dominate it and almost bring it to extinction and/or completely bring it to extinction? Is there an animal on this planet that takes over when it comes to
Yes,
mankind
the
by comparison?
dinosaurs, and that's the third step that they're going to bring
I don't
back.
think so, Bernie. You can bring the biggest dinosaur that's ever lived on this planet back right now today, and it will be down within 10 seconds with our technology.
We'll just nuke it.
Yes, there's nothing on this planet that even slightly compares to humans
Okay,
as far as
Nephilim, we can
know.
bring back the Nephilim, and yes, they're bigger and scarier because they're
Yes,
just
but like I said,
giant
as
apparently.
far as we know, those types of things are that of mythos and legend, and we have evidence in support that they did exist and perhaps still do exist, even though there's no absolute proof of that. There is some weekly supporting evidence, but until they actually show up and we know that they're still around and or even interested in what's going on here on good old Terra, right? I'm not
I don't
really
know.
gonna be too concerned with it.
My Uncle Bob said he saw a Sasquatch once.
Oh, I
I've
do believe that.
encountered Sasquatch, and they are real, as far as I'm concerned, and my experience.
Same here.
with them.
I've never met one, but I am absolutely convinced that they are real because I've got an uncle that has met with one twice.
Our
Well,
prime
he's dead
minister.
now.
Our prime minister is a Sasquatch. You didn't know?
Just because he's a predator doesn't make him
don't
a
insult the
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch
Okay?
like that. Don't ever insult the Sasquatch like that.
Yeah, good point.
That's funny.
That dude belongs
I'm
in the
gonna get
cage with the
arrested
rest
for
of the
that one.
monkeys.
Oh.
Yeah, I just demoted the Sasquatch.
Yeah, no, don't worry. Phil didn't mean nothing by it. That Sasquatch. No, I actually think the Sasquatch are highly intelligent creatures.
Yeah, we don't want to
And
offend the
yeah,
Sasquatch
Gerald.
community.
I doubt that they're watching YouTube, however.
That's right. Exactly.
But you never know. Hey,
You never know.
Sasquatch might have snuck up on somebody with a really bright screen, and they might have dropped that phone. So Sasquatch got like a few hours to watch YouTube. I wouldn't. Hey, if I was a Sasquatch and somebody dropped their smartphone in the woods and they had internet, you think I would just leave that thing sit there or like poke at it randomly? No, I'd pick it up and start playing with it. I'd want to know what has got these people so distracted that I was literally able to walk up on them. I remember for the last 50 years that every time I got within 500 feet, everybody would run screaming or something like that. But now I can just walk right up to them and they don't even notice me. So what's so important in this little light up hand device that they've got that's more significant than me?
Good point, right? Or they just smash it and be like, it's evil magic.
Sasquatch is way too smart to do that.
I always pictured a Sasquatch plugging the phone into a tree to charge it.
I imagine Sasquatch playing with the phone and thinking, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
This is the dumbest shit. Let's go eat some humans. Let's go eat some humans.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely pious. I mean, anyways, we've got a lot going on here on this end. And
Yeah,
we
what
have
have you been
been
working on?
busy in the lab. Okay, well, let's see. On projects that are currently out and just floating around, I've got major improvements in the gravity wave generator. Many different iterations now of the A field coil, the H field Helmholtz control coils, and I haven't done much in terms of the resonance chamber or the primary ionizer, and I still have yet to modify the transducers, though I did change the way I'm driving them. But let me explain what this thing is that I'm talking about. So, the gravity wave generator is sort of like a canister made of plastic. Imagine it like a 3/4 size coffee can.
Okay.
And on the top of it is a perforated sort of like 4 millimeter holes that are spaced apart by like 8 millimeters, just in sort of a hexagonal pattern on the top. And it's all 3D printed parts. And then underneath that set of holes on the plastic, that's just to allow some, air in and out and allow some sound in and out, but still have some kind of mainly flat surface for the sound waves to bounce off of. And so underneath that, by about a centimeter, is an ionization wire made of 0.0005 millimeter thick tungsten wire. And the great part about that wire having such an insanely freaking small cross section, which, by the way, this stuff is so delicate as you're working with it to try and wind it around in an ionizer spiral. If you were to, say, take your two fingers and hold it, fairly tight between your two fingers, and then you let somebody drop a chopstick on it, like a wooden, like a bamboo chopstick from Chinese takeout, right? From only 1 inch above, it would snap this thing. That's how delicate it is. So it's hard to work with, but the cross section is so small that at 10 kV potential, it can send ions flowing 20 feet away.
That's a lot.
So it adds a tremendous acceleration potential, and once you hit about 10 to 15 kV, if there's a grounded object within 6 inches of it, your current at about 10 kV will start rising, and by the time you hit 15 kV compared to 10 kV, your current will have gone up by a full order of magnitude. And if you try to go all the way to 20 kV, it'll have to go up by another full order of magnitude. So what can happen here because of this is you have a really huge amount of ions, but you don't have a particularly high acceleration potential between the ionizer and the ground plate. So it can create a massive amount of ions in a really small volume, aka an ultra high cold plasma density. And this cold plasma fills the inside of this canister. And it travels from the top, where the ionizer is, towards the brass face of 7 piezo transducers raised in a hexagonal grid. Each transducer is spaced 3 millimeters away from the base plate and of the bottom of the cylinder, and that gives them a tiny little resonance cavity so that they can freely oscillate, and gives a space for the wires that connect each of them to pass out. And so that that's what's going on inside the canister. So you have these ions that are produced at the top. There's a huge number of them. They flow down somewhat slowly by comparison through the air, bumping into free air molecules and putting pressure on stuff, and things getting in the way. And as they're doing this, they're also producing an electric wave because they're charged particles. And as charged particles move from one place to another, they produce a traveling electric field, which viewed at 90 degrees produces a transverse magnetic field. So now we have this source of energy that's radiating off electromagnetic fields just from the ions flowing. And now what do? We wrap two coils, both on the top and bottom of the cylinder, the space between them, and these coils are like basic solenoid coils. In fact, I can do one better. Let me just go on cam here. Oh, yes, that's not going to help anybody until I click settings and tell it to use the other camera. That does work.
There you go.
Okay, so I guess I'll start back over. So here is the ionizer mesh. I don't know how visible it is, but you might be able to see there's an extraordinarily thin wire between each of those
You
little
barely see
notches.
it.
Now, if we look down inside the canister, we have 7 piezo transducers. And so I'm going to plug this back in because that thing is so sensitive. If I bump it or anything touches it, it'll break. And so now as those ions are moving from the top to the bottom, these two coils are oscillating with an alternating current magnetic field that has a north on the top at any given point and a south on the bottom. They're both arranged to produce the same polarity of vector axes. And so those ions, instead of traveling just straight down a line, they'll now start to take little cyclotron loops. And as the field reverses, they'll take one loop and then go back. So now you can see that there's a more complex motion. We've taken a linear motion that does have an acceleration. So the ion starts out and mainly moves slowly all the way down to right about the tip where it hits those transducers, and then it suddenly accelerates because the electric field there by those transducers is stronger. Now we've added this spin back and forth. We've added a vortex motion, counter-rotating vortex motion, but we haven't added enough because now what we want to add is a vortex inside of a vortex. So to take this simple wrapping back and forth motion and to make it go like this in little loops, sort of like you taken a spring and wrapped it into a circle, now we use the A-field coil. The A-field coil is the most interesting part of this gadget, and it's what's different about my machine than any other machine that has come before it so far as I know. And that is this coil has wires in the center, I'll show you one that's out, that are completely straight, parallel with each other, whereas on the outside they are at an angle. But I made sure that they were very straight in the center to make sure that the A-field vector potential axes coming off this coil passes through the inside of the cylinder and encompasses all those charged particles in the cold activated plasma that's flowing from the top to the bottom and being twisted around in cyclotron motion by these coils. And so what this will do is wiggle that cyclotron motion up and down in addition to the force from the piezo transducers. And so I can generate a phase interference between these two by running them at harmonics and control how many loops I get per loop, which is interesting because at that point, when you make an electron or an ion take a really fast curve and it has acceleration potential pushing on it, it actually loses some speed. It doesn't lose any downward speed, but because it's traveling downwards and it's also going in this loop loses speed. And the momentum is actually lost from the charged particle and radiated outwards in the form of a wave that's called Bremsstrahlung radiation. Now, Bremsstrahlung radiation is interesting because you can produce almost any frequency, but in this case, it tends to produce frequencies in the terahertz range. In that double-digit terahertz range in particular, that operates at the interatomic frequencies of physical matter. And so what I'm hoping to do with this is, as that cold activated plasma is moved, because the piezo transducers will only generate a sound wave that actually travels and ripples up and down and creates standing waves inside here, those sound waves are independent. That's not moving the whole entire mass of the particles at once. The sound wave can't move them all at once in a coherent state. It can only move them in a longitudinal wave that propagates through space. But the A-field coil is a bit of magic because it is using a field to move those charged particles, not a pressure wave that's atmospheric. So the velocity of this field is the speed of light, and the velocity of this field is the speed of sound. And so this field can grab all those particles all at once and move them up and down. And what do we call a cold activated plasma that's moving all in unison? We call it a coherent matter state. And it's very interesting when you start to get macroscopic effects with coherent matter states, because you can start to generate effects like gravitational waves, or what the patents call a matter wave. It was also referred to by Henry William Wallace as the kinematic field. And it exhibits itself in a variety of forms. P.T. Brown identified that natural materials, when oscillated or given a pulsed electric charge that stimulates their motion, will produce gravitational waves, and he called these special materials gravitational and inertial isotopes. So that basically gives you a summary of that one apparatus. That's one of 6 that I'm working on right now. And it's the one that I'm most excited about.
Gravitational waves for me is a shock wave of time dilation, basically.
That's right.
And can you do you have an instrument precise enough to measure that? Because I just bought a GPS do with the oven cook oscillator to measure time dilation, but it's not
That's
precise
a good
enough.
idea too, but it won't help me in this situation, because this is not designed to create a it's not designed to create an accumulated time dilation in the way that I'm going to run it. In order to make it do that, what I would have to do is create a phase variance between the A field coil pump harmonic frequency that's arranged with the standing wave frequency of the acoustic side. And I can then create a group velocity that's a traveling wave that stacks the 2 standing waves on top of each other.
Okay.
And they'll end up having an actual motion that's either up or down along the vertical axes of that device.
Oh, I see.
There's also the possibility too that if I reverse the 2 H field coil, if I reverse one of the 2 H field coils so that I have 2 bucking magnetic fields in the center, I can achieve what you're specifically talking about, which is either a compression or a refraction in the localized refractive index stress energy momentum tensor value.
So I have a question for you, Jeremiah. Are you creating a singularity point of energy right between the 2 vortexes in the center?
I don't like to call it a singularity point, because that would be not quite accurate. It is like a macroscopic singularity, and you can consider the entire inside volume of the cross section of the A field coil for its height and in its entire width as a solid cylinder of plasma that's being moved up and down all at once coherently.
Gotcha.
Now, it doesn't just stop, obviously, at the edges of the A field coil. It travels up and around, but now, because it's not in the center of the A field coil, it possesses a gradient, so it actually tapers off into the shape of a torus. And because that torus is straight in the center, where all those field lines go, it does curve around sharply at the edges, creating an actual spin torus, which then gives us the properties of a pseudoelectron, or a pseudocharged particle. And it's a funny field effect. It's a macroscopic space-time type phenomena, but I suppose I should call it time-space, really, because in this perspective, the way this device is built and the fundamental psychology behind its operation is of an aether-centric view of the universe, not a matter-centric view. Relativity takes us down to a matter-centric view and supposes that matter is actually the source of all of the stress energy that fills space, hence creating the gravitational and cosmological constants. But that's not the case at all. It turns out that matter itself is actually furnished of that same energy that is existing in space. It happens to be just that the energy is folded in on itself in such a way that it is now self-persistent. And there are many different stable forms that you can fold energy in on itself, but it has to be an exact quanta of its own energy in order to form a self-stable loop. Basically, it's saying, if you want to convince the Ouroboros to bite its own tail and start to eat itself, you've got to put something tasty on its tail. So, and in this case, plasma is that tasty little thing that the Ouroboros uses to bite down and try to chew on in order to digest this reality and turn it into whatever shape we've told it to spin.
It's ionization.
Well,
You're
we theorize that we can actually generate spontaneously physical matter of various sizes, provided that we have a sufficiently high degree of built-up energy that's been radiated from this system out in the coherent matter state, and now has created a localized refractive index modification suitable for reaching the extremely high stress energy momentum density thresholds that allow us to break the Schwinger limit and start ripping physical matter straight out of space-time.
So hold on. Did you set your resonance points 100% equal to the very exact point between the north and the south, or between the top vortex and the bottom? When you built
The
your
sound,
bipolar,
Molecular
what you're asking is, have
thing.
I tuned the acoustic frequency to be ideal for the generation of a standing wave within the internal enclosure? Yes, that's exactly what must be done, and this is a key for this device, and anybody that's trying to build such a device. It's also very relevant for the gravity flyer stuff, and that is you have to start with some fundamental thing that you're going to be using as your base frequency in order to determine what the harmonics of the other systems need to be in order to make it work. So in Alexi's case, the first primary base frequency, the carrier, is the resonance of the disks themselves, the spinning disks. And the spinning disks don't just rotate. It's not just the velocity of the B field and the H fields, but it's also, or the velocity just of the electric field, but it is in fact actually a resonant mode of the disk surface physically moving up and down in an oscillating wave that's generating sound waves, compressing and expanding the space between those disks and the center disk. And those allow the charges that are already flying off the edges of the disks and the air molecules that are between them being polarized and stretched by the electric field superimposed from the charge on the two spinning disks versus the alternating potential of the center disk. And those charges, because they're now in motion, possess more stress energy surrounding them in space than they otherwise would at rest. And that effectively amplifies the electric fields that are present and the magnetic fields that are present, um, because you're affecting the speed of light there with that interaction. So there's a cumulative type of effect when these two fields stack on top of each other. And if the acoustic frequency is exactly a match of the AC pump frequency at some harmonic, and the AC pump frequency, I couldn't tell you exactly what harmonic it's on. It could be the 11th or the 9th or something like that. But anyways, if you happen to match those frequencies and your RPMs are maintained, the whole system will want to fall into resonance because you have to get it close enough, and then it'll phase lock. And it's just one of those funny little things that happens where if you get any two resonance systems close enough, they'll tend to phase lock and try to act coherently with each other. It's the same reason why the ions in my system will all grab, sort of hold virtual quantum hands and move together in one unison. But yeah, the gravity flyer operates by some of the same principles, which is super interesting to think about.
well, it uses 1/3 of the harmonic wave that the upper one does, and as soon as you get it to a certain resonance frequency, the top one actually will start to stall out and then pull it right into resonance with each other. And then they'll hit a resonance frequency through the center disk. And then as you move the center disk, it changes where you're at in the octave of it. It'll jump right
Right.
away. Yeah,
I've always
exactly.
I thought about perhaps one better approach to the Greviflyer that obviously this would be so stupidly ludicrous or complicated, I suppose, that I don't see anybody actually taking it on. But imagine that you had a mechanical system of, say, 3 tensioner arms that could be distorted or what do they call that? Conformed, basically bent to shorten or lengthen the distance between the disks and adjust them independently on 2 separate servo channels. Then you could live dynamically tune the system with a fixed AC frequency, for example, that was already pumped and well in tune, or a fixed RPM from some very precisely controlled stepper motors to drive the disks instead. And those types of things wouldn't allow the system to naturally fall into tune, but with the adjustment of the servo motors, you could basically force resonance by adjusting it until it fell into tune, and you would be able to tell when it does based on the sound.
Oh, I've heard it. It's
Yes,
a
there's a
theme.
sudden change. It's almost like,
Yes.
it's like normally high frequency, and then when this happens, you'll suddenly hear it go, and you're almost like your ears pop a little bit. It feels like the pressure in the room changes, and
it
what's
does.
happened here is the electric field has now become physically manifest as an equivalent mass. It's basically acting like pseudomatter, and it's because it's grabbing onto all the charges that are being flung around this machine, and the entire volume of space inside that room are all now somewhat quantumly entangled with the primary field of the active plasma that's between the two disks and around the edges of the disks in the graviflyer. And when that happens, you get the coherence. So the graviflyer doesn't just pull up on its own fields now, it's now pulling up on the fields of literally everything else around it.
Mhm.
So it sort of gives you an idea of what the lift mechanism starts to look like in comparison to thinking this is an autonomous vehicle that just operates on its own, free of everything else. No, it definitely does not. It needs to interact with everything else. That's the primary way that it can actually generate any kind of relative force compared to its standing environment.
Well, see, that's why the geometry coil is so interesting, because it does those things without all the rotation. The rotation's in the winding. You know what I mean? That speed can be increased exponentially compared to the simple gravity flyer. So the harmonics in there are much better.
Oh, yeah. And I honestly, just personally, I hate the freaking graviflyer. I have one.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
very, very nice unit. And
It's a pain in
I've
the
already
butt.
got it to do plenty of weird things, but what I realized about this design is it's absolutely ludicrous. It's really quite a childish design because it doesn't allow you the ability to fine-tune anything in a dynamic way. In order to change something in the system, you have to shut it off.
Mhm.
And that's a retarded idea that doesn't allow you to actually tune it in. Just imagine, every time you wanted to change a station on your radio, you had to completely unplug it and take it apart. Nobody would ever find the station they're looking for. So I have a different approach,
that's a good
a
point.
solid state approach that
Yeah.
allows you to dynamically tune things with only changes in frequency by varying capacitance or inductance in the driving circuits.
That's right.
Do you have meters to measure the output of your device?
The word, yeah, I would say is probes, and I use an oscilloscope to measure it.
Okay.
Hmm.
And you say you can reach the Schwinger limit at some point?
Yes, I've gotten spontaneous generation of radiation that sets off my Geiger.
It's important to get that, by the way.
But I will tell you, I'm not there yet. So don't come to my door now hoping that you're going to see something, because it is not operational yet. I have built the fundamental pieces of the apparatuses that I need to be in place in order to start and play with these concepts. But I have not yet built the driving circuitry or perfected the modes of oscillation that will be required in order to get this system operating coherently. And quite frankly, I can pump all the power I want into this thing all day long, and I can expect it, rightfully so, to do absolutely freaking nothing interesting. Because unless it's tuned, you might as well just randomly put strings on a guitar. Throw piano strings on a guitar. Hell, use a shoelace for D, and just pluck away and try to play something that's going to sound melodious. And
No,
right, that's the dabbling of the graviflyer, in my opinion.
no. With the coils, though, the interesting part is the less amount of energy and the better frequency in oscillation is worth all the weight in gold, because 10 volts
Absolutely.
goes a long way.
It's the funny thing is about a standing wave, it's cumulative. You can build up an extremely high amplitude as long as your system has high Q and doesn't basically waste energy internally.
Mhm.
You can build up an insanely high radiation density from an incredibly low amplitude input. Just the tiniest little whisper, imperceptible to us, placed next to a tuning fork, will eventually allow that tuning fork, if it's just at the right frequency, to ring up to such an amplitude that it will now fling water away and you'll hear it ringing across the room and through the door. And yet that thing you could have placed your ear 5 inches away from the sound source and yet not heard it.
Can you create water with this? Can we, like,
It should be possible because the constituent atoms of water are not a particularly large number of particles. So it would be something that'd be on the easier side to generate, I'd say. But if we want to start with anything, we're going to obviously start first by looking for hydrogen without an electron. And the electrons may already be present because, the first stage when you actually break through the threshold is you're going to get positron-electron pairs. And so at minimum, you'll have the signature of positronium being generated and falling back together in terms of the exactly 511 keV gamma photon emission. that shows up. So a gamma spectrometer will be able to indicate to you whether you've actually achieved or broken that limit. Past that point, there are other things well beyond that threshold. And again, people think about the Schwinger limit as this impossible to reach thing requiring insanely high energies or petawatt lasers pulsed into a microscopic volume of space, like the National Ignition Facility, for example, or think that you have to have insanely high velocities of charged particles slamming together in order to create magical effects like they think at CERN or other accelerator labs. And both of these ideas are absolutely ignorant and ludicrous because these folks don't understand the dynamics of space. And as Gerald said earlier, the idea of relativity trying to lock us into a physical manifest space that is immalleable to us and requires insanely high energies to be modified is wrong. What he does not understand is the nonlinearities are the key component of these systems. And space-time is extremely nonlinear. You can't just keep on adding an electric field indefinitely and expect nothing to change. That's not how things work in this universe. Otherwise, there'd be no inertia. The fact that things experience resistance to acceleration at all is a testament to the fact that their electric fields are the magnetic moments, even in the case of neutrons, which possess a magnetic moment, actually have to repolarize new space relative to their previous position in order to move from any place to another. And that's what actually gives us inertia. It's the fundamental basis behind it. Is the electric fields and the magnetic fields and their moments have to repolarize the physical space when that thing is given an acceleration force away from its original its position, because it will fight against its own field where it's all nicely comfortably sank in to the background and everything is uniform around it in terms of all directions. And now you created a non-uniformity by trying to displace it from its bed. And
Yeah.
it's
So
going to want to fall back down there because the bed doesn't spring up instantly. It has to travel out at the velocity of light. And that creates your inertia.
yeah, inertia is kinetic energy. That's all it is. By the way, if you can reach the Schwinger limit, you can definitely create the force field I keep talking about. With the time dilation, shock wave. I need kind of a certain amount of energy, but if you can't reach that or duplicate it, then I'm just saying that you might be able to create a force field before I'm able to.
Well, perhaps. I mean, we've already gotten force field-like effects. I can tell you what the seed of that concept might be. When I was making the core for the A field coil, it's a torus-shaped ring, and I 3D print this thing. Simon made us some excellent 3D printed files. He sends me G-code directly from my K1 Max, which I don't have to do any work on a slicer to run, right? Yeah, huge shout out to Simon for that one. He is insanely good at what he does. And so I just pop on the flash drive and throw it on there, and now I've got a new A-field coil core. But of course, this core I've asked him to design is hollow. It's just two walls with, chamfered edges on the bottom and top. And on the top side, instead of it going back to a flat on the top of the torus, the very edge of the ring, it's got a slot that goes around in the form of a ring that I can fill it with epoxy or whatever else I chose. And so I mixed up 100 grams of black iron oxide with 40 grams of 1 hour working time epoxy. And I should have used a lower centipoise thickness because this stuff was way too thick and difficult to work with. It was a major problem, but I mixed all this batch together, threw it in the vacuum chamber, degassed it, which, by the way, the process of degassing is awesome because it will mix up your epoxy with your particulate suspended particles, in this case, black iron oxide, and make it really uniform, which is something that you couldn't do no matter how long you mixed it. You would never be able to mix it fast enough anyways, because the epoxy would set by the time you'd finally gotten even close to what a vacuum chamber will just do for you in like 5 minutes. But 20 minutes in, it takes me to prepare, about 10 to 20 minutes in, the epoxy is already fully mixed in and it's ready to go, so it's going to set pretty quickly after that. And so now you're racing against the clock to try to fill this core with the stuff, but what you end up with is a magnetic core that you made yourself that now has a significantly higher mu, and so its refractive index is much, much larger than the vacuum, and so any electromagnetic waves that travel through it will be prismatically distorted along their pathway because of its physical density alone. But the fact that it's also magnetic material means that the A field coil's frequency can now be dropped with the same amount of current flowing through it. And that means I can accumulate much more energy in the audio frequencies of the higher double-digit to triple-digit kilohertz in order to physically oscillate at one of the harmonics of the acoustic frequency. And that was a problem with the A-field coil originally. It didn't have a core, and so it didn't have enough inductance to drop the frequency down below like several megahertz. And now I can operate it into the kilohertz range.
What if you microwave it?
That would completely melt it.
I mean, it would change its molecular bonding structure. So,
Well, yeah, absolutely, it would melt it. I mean, it's made of PLA, which melts at a pretty low temperature.
no, I'm
And
talking about the epoxy. Like, instead of putting it in the vacuum chamber, what if you microwave it?
the vacuum chamber is necessary because it pulls the air out.
Okay.
If you microwave it, the heat of the microwave will cause the epoxy to rapidly cure and go into a runaway state where it starts smoking or even catching fire. So that would be a really, really, really bad idea. Never microwave epoxy. Also, epoxy will release a massive amount of toxic fumes that will stick to everything inside your microwave, guaranteeing that all of your future food will be poisoned with contaminants. So, again, don't ever microwave epoxy.
I wasn't talking about my kitchen. I was just talking about, like, in a lab setting, like a microwave.
No, don't microwave epoxy anyways, because epoxy is a miracle of science. Let's face it. You take two liquids that are shelf stable for an extremely long time, you mix them together, and within 20 minutes to an hour, they become a solid plastic. That the miracle of that chemistry to make those molecules link together and self-catalyze in a not too insane, somewhat exothermic reaction is nothing short of miraculous, and to ruin it by disrupting its molecular structure in that fine chemistry with microwaves would pretty much destroy the entire thing that's happened.
So hold on, Gerald, you're already in the megahertz on that coil, right? Like you're approaching the gigahertz or something like that?
No, this coil is far too long of a wire wavelength to operate in gigahertz, but yes, it absolutely operates in megahertz.
What is it, a 3-inch pipe on a what looks like to be 5 inches tall?
It's about 5 inches wide, and that coil is about 2 inches tall.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, right in there. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's got something like 96 turns or something around there.
Oh, what, like 32 gauge or?
32 gauge? No, man. Like 12 gauge.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh, man, that coil weighs over a pound with the core. It doesn't look
crazy.
like it. It doesn't look anywhere near as heavy, but I have made the energy density of this system way freaking higher, dude. I'm not playing around in the double digit watts range now. We're talking 200 to 300 watts I can pump into this thing, no problem. The real weak point of this system right now is the piezo transducers, because they can only operate in the milliwatts range. Realistically, like, yes, I have had them operating at up to 7 watts, and they get freaking hot really fast. It takes about 30 seconds to completely overheat them, and if I run them longer than that, it'll crack the surface piezoelectric crystal and start to delaminate. So that would be really bad.
You don't want that much energy in there. Yeah, it's too much energy.
Well, they just can't. They're just not physically a thick enough crystal to handle or dissipate that type of momentum. So they can't oscillate that quickly without thermal energy distorting them. But anyways, there are thicker transducers and better things that I can use for that. I just simply haven't gotten around to constructing them, because I am already using the best that I can find in terms of pre-made products that I can just buy off the shelf. And that was the whole modus operandi behind why I designed this device this way. All the parts are 3D printed, so anybody can replicate that. All the wire is off-the-shelf stuff. I'm not using any magic sauce materials. I'm just using epoxy and black iron oxide that you can grab on Amazon, eBay, or I got mine from, what was it? Let me see, American Metals or something like that. I forget exactly what their name is. Yeah, I don't see the paper around here. Anyways, doesn't matter. You can source this material. So everything that this thing is made of is all stuff that people can buy or acquire fairly easily. But now if I have to do something like make custom transducers, I've added a layer of complexity that's going to make it more difficult to replicate. So if I can find an off-the-shelf solution, I would like to use it, since ultimately, when this thing does some magic that I can videotape and share, beyond what it's already kind of done, because it's not significant enough that I want to try to produce or put out any information or literature or footage of it vaguely kind of sort of moving stuff. So that's, like I said, any better driving circuitry and all that stuff. Yeah, so it's a work in progress. But when we do, I don't want people to be scratching their heads wondering how they're going to do it. I want them to be able to click on the description and open up a file database, download the 3D files, and start getting their hands busy building it, so that they can make their own gravity waves, and they don't have to get, whatever magical element Bob Lazar says you need in this special antimatter resonator cavity. They can also start making it on their lab bench.
Now, I'm just going to say this, Jeremiah. I really think that the lower the voltage, the better off you're going to be, because the resonance will produce plasma inside the wire itself, which will just come out as energy, but it multiplies the amount as long as you have it low enough. You see, when you get to too high, it saturates it too fast, it's gone. When you have it low, then you'll saturate your entire room with the resonance. So you have to lower it in order to make it a weak field to interact with the other weak fields to make a strong field out of it.
Well, let's specify exactly why that is, though, because you can tell people that, and they're not going to understand exactly what the reason for why it needs to be less power instead of more power.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so here's the thing. If you have a really powerful amplifier hooked up to your speaker, and that amplifier has a really low impedance, any waves that hit the speaker are not going to be able to enter into it and affect the amplifier parametrically, because the amplifier is basically going to just short them out and crush them. But if you have a weakly coupled amplifier, like say you connect your speaker with a series capacitor and your amplifier is a high impedance amp, now the sound waves that hit the speaker from another source will cause the speaker to act like a microphone, sending energy back into that circuit. And if that circuit of the amplifier happens to be connected to some variable frequency oscillator that isn't fixed by a crystal or something, but it's just dynamically controlled by a capacitive inductive LC, then LC oscillator, then now it can interact with that field and start to be sympathetic with the external input. So two coils that are somewhat close in frequency, if they're close enough and the amplitudes of driving one coil are not too tightly coupled to some reference point, both coils can now sing with each other, and when they share a field, even if they're not exactly in tune, they will sing in tune.
Yes, they will.
And that's what you're saying, is the importance is you don't have such a powerful signal driving one side that it's not able to hear the other signals around it.
Exactly.
And this is basically the problem that a lot of people I know have, which is they want to do all the talking, and when anybody else has something to say, they won't shut up long enough to listen. And I know when I've gotten excited, I have done this plenty of times to almost all of you. So I'm guilty of what I am pointing out here, but not to be a hypocrite. This is something I think we all need to kind of observe and work on sometimes.
That is why I've left myself muted and let you guys discuss this gold.
Yeah, because before I jumped on, my only thought was, well, this is a real cluster. And I would love to get in there and start to bring this together into some coherent discussion where we talk about what we are actually capable of doing to space-time and start screwing with things. All right? Because I don't know, I get bored by all these fake videos and all the crap that I see on YouTube, and so many people with big claims telling you, hey, it's not going to work if you don't have this or if you don't have that, and you'll never be able to do it unless you have my book or my theory or my newest gadget. And by the way, I won't even tell you, watch my channel for the updates when I'm going to never tell you, but I'll always promise that I will.
But you need the super force. You need the super force.
That's right. Get your super force right here, folks. Super force, $5 for $1. Get them while you still suckers and you don't have to believe in it.
Oh, that's great. Oh.
No, I mean, I like Sal Pius in terms of conversation. We've had a lot of great interviews together. But the fact that he wants to stick Superforce as his own little candy on top of what's existed long before him, and has existed basically
since
the creation of the universe, right? Sorry, Sal, but it is a pretty super kind of force. I'll definitely give you that, but it's not the super force as defined by Sal Pius.
That's not his.
And that's why we need to have Sal Pius versus Jack Serfati, because they're both fighting
Oh
for the
my
same
gosh,
super
yes.
force. And it's like, y'all need to battle it out, and then the world will come to the conclusion that it's neither of yours, it's everyone's.
Yeah, as we've said many times, we want to get them both into the philosophical boxing ring and let them just duke it out with their theories,
Mixed
and
mental
whether it's
arts.
the Sarfati factor or the super force.
Or the
Bernie,
fuck man. Like,
Yeah,
Bernie,
who gets to call the variable refractive index their own name?
hey Bernie, Bernie, I gotta square up the show here soon. I gotta be up early, so
no worries, brother.
Sounds good. Well, I hope that was
yeah,
entertaining to y'all.
That
I
was
mean, I have a
amazing.
lot more to cover, like the free energy generator stuff, but we're not going to talk about that today, I don't think.
I just
Yeah,
want
we'll
to
do that.
reiterate that the super
Right.
force is just a Planck linear energy density, which is the maximum force that you can have in our galaxy. But that's about it. It's not a freaking force that is super.
Actually,
But
and this is where he's wrong because there's actually an ultra force beyond the super force where you actually start to generate other things with different mass energy densities that are not equivalent to electron energy. 511 keV per particle, or a total of 1.022 MeV, is not the threshold that space is absolutely limited to. That just happens to be the threshold that when you reach it, you start to get electrons and positrons. But you can go beyond that and start to get protons and neutrons and other particles, and many of the mesons that'll just show up. I mean, you get all kinds of manifest particles, and some of them are actually stable. So the fact is that we're just not reaching those energies by slamming things together, because you've got a lot of people that have hammers for heads and they think everything is a nail and that's the solution. But what we really need now in the physics community that we don't have in the particle accelerator labs and don't have in the National Ignition Facility and don't have in the high energy nuclear reaction stuff where we're talking, tokamaks and that, is we don't have a lot of people who are surgeons that know how to work with a scalpel. Fine fields that are very sensitive, what we call subtle energies, that can actually communicate with things on the level of something like human consciousness. And you start to get weird effects around these machines, by the way, where you can emotionally feel a connection to this inanimate object because of its resonances.
Have
yeah,
you ever been in a server room with all the equipment on?
I have, and oh man, is that a weird experience.
It is. I've been in a server room of my university, and it's one of the most wonderful feelings that you could be. And it feels like you could hear the world, but not. It's humming, but it's such a.
Exactly. Just imagine all these communications going all right by you. It's sort of like standing in a box in the center of the busiest city street, city cross section with all these people walking around and everything. You got all these signals, but nobody knows you're there. It is kind of like that. All those little electromagnetic waves, all those signals, they do cohere and create other resonance modes that your brain picks up on.
all right. So cheers, Mike.
yeah, everybody, thanks a lot. It was a
Much
great
love.
cast tonight. We had our live chat was on fire all night long, so
I didn't
that
look
was
at it once, I think, after I got on. So sorry, everyone, if you asked me questions.
yeah, there were
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
I do like to
yeah.
monologue sometimes. I apologize.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
we'll go live to her again next week, Friday night at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. And don't forget to check out Nathan's channel, Ben's channel, Philip's channel, and also Gerald as well. Thank you, Gerald, for coming on for a little while. He had to bug out early, but glad he came on for a little bit there. He put in his 2 cents. And as he always does. I almost had to put him in
I'd
a
say
rubber.
6 cents. He's got 6 cents he puts in.
Yeah, the G factor.
Oh man, that's a good one. That's clever. I'm gonna have to say that to him one time and watch him crack up at it. You gotta mention that next time when he gets on and say, "Hey, it's the G factor."
God. Anyways, guys. Anyways,
of course.
yeah, have a great night, everybody. We'll see everybody next week.
Sounds
Good night,
good.
everybody.
Later, all.
Cheers.
Cheers. Take care.
Good night. Have a good weekend.